Hello and thank you for opening my presentation. My name is Borbala Gaspar. The title of my presentation that I will talk about here and now is the effect of multimodal communication on the development of new types of learner imagination. Technologies provide an invaluable opportunity for foreign language learners to connect with target language speakers within the use of a broader spectrum of communication such as images, videos, sounds, and other forms of signs. Despite the fact that there are many research on foreign and second language learning using a mobile application, there is still little known regarding the role of co-constructed imagination in language learning. Specifically, there is still little known about the effects that the type of multimodal communication can have on the imagination of the learner. When I started this presentation, I said that I am presenting here and now. With this, I wanted to emphasize the mobility that technology allows us to do today. With the use of technology, we are able to virtually read spaces without physically moving. With the use of mobile phones, we can access applications that allow us not only to connect with people, but also to simultaneously conversate with them. Such mobile machines, as Irie explains, reconfigure humans as physically moving bodies, and as bits of mobile information and image, individuals exist both through and beyond these mobile bodies. These mobile phones change the way we live today as we become more and more connected and dependent on these technologies. Knowing someone becomes increasingly networked. We feel incomplete without our network and our mobile. And if we lose our phone, we feel like we lose our network. These new roles of technology, according to Irie, demands new types of capital that completes borders economic, social, and symbolic capitals. The following research question guided this study. The concept of imagination has been addressed in theories of identity construction by many scholars, and these works have provided us with examples of how future is imagined by learners. Yet most of these studies limit their focus primarily on the imagined and planned future of the language learners, withdrawing this way the possible effects it may have on the present, claiming that imagination presupposes new identities, and placing imagination purely related to the self as the processes of the individual, leaving out other imagination, in particular how can imagination be co-constructed. Imagination have been previously connected with learning in study by Tisdale. In this study, learners are using media, and through these TV programs, they are able to imagine themselves as characters. In this study, however, media provide opportunities for a one-way imagination between learner and the TV. Kramsch points out that the reason we are teaching foreign languages is to provide opportunities for learners to gain insight into cultural differences, as well as to give them opportunities to participate in multicultural communities. In their study, based on the form of miscommunication, we can recognize the presence and importance of culture in language. This might compel us to take advantage of computer-mediated communication in ways that provide possibilities for learners to negotiate meaning embedded in a text as a representation of cultural practices. Weir and Kramsch argue that learners need to develop the capacity to imagine how people live and to see themselves through the eyes of others. Although not explicitly addressing imagination, in a telecollaborative study, Malinowski shows the role of synesthesia in how foreign language learners of French draw themselves together with their correspondents into the same space as they interact in the same context. Through drawings, learners link together spatial and bodily meanings. These learners imagine and illustrate in the drawings a symbolic space where they interact with their correspondent in a space where the concept of space and time take on a different meaning. Similarly to Malinowski, I will take the argument further, and I will provide new examples of how through imagination learners break down time and space and move into a here and now common space with their conversation partners, as they make sense of different communication forms through which they co-construct their imagination. I define imagination the following way. According to this view, imagination serves as a mediating element between physical and symbolic spaces, for example, between the place one is sitting and the images in the HelloTalk text. For this reason, imagination also transcends time and space constraints and has the capacity to connect time and spaces, thus eliminating a static view of them. Imagination is crucial in connecting language with other forms of communication, such as images, videos, emoji, or other semiotic signs. Imagination, though, serves as a tool to provide opportunities for learners to self-position and reposition in the here and now. As learners continue their prolonged conversation with their language exchange friends, they are constantly imagining how their language exchange friends live their everyday life through the images, videos, audio files, and the discourses that they exchange with each other. All these multimodal ways of communication lead to an imagination that, because its richness, provide them opportunities to imagine being in the friend space and consequently position themselves as participants in the space that through time becomes familiar. In this presentation, I will discuss what I call the imagined projected self and the imagined instant presence. Before moving to the analysis, I would like to show two concrete examples. First one that refers to an imagined project self in the narrative that is a result of factual information gathered in a prolonged multimodal conversation between two participants over time. The indication here lays in the use of pronoun you and you want to and you have to. Instead of distancing herself from Italians, saying they have to or they want to, she includes and projects herself into the group with the use of the you pronoun. Second, a projected instant presence, a socially mediated co-constructed imagination between two participants that is spontaneous, synchronously happens during the conversation. However, this is a report, a narrative reflection of it. This is what I call the imagined instant presence, a type of imagination that does not necessarily have a specific goal for the future. In this excerpt, Sylvia is imagining being at the soccer game that is also her dream. However, we will see in other future examples that this type of imagination does not necessarily happen for a specific goal for the future. In order to provide practice opportunities in Italian outside of the class, students use an online language exchange application called HelloTalk for at least 35 minutes a week. Students had a sharing day for which they were asked to bring one interesting image, word, or a story in Italian that they learned from their conversation partners on HelloTalk. Before they came to class, they were asked to post the picture on the example they wanted to share with class in a Google Drive slideshow presentation that we had. Furthermore, students took at least 10 screenshots of their conversation and wrote a short weekly report in English of their experiences that they submitted weekly. While I have many examples of students using Italian and writing a lot in Italian, I particularly picked instances related to imagination. These examples here are in English. Participants in this study were enrolled in the intermediate Italian course. They speak Italian on the low intermediate level. Due to the nature of the goals of the current paper, I selected the work of 4 students. I chose to include participants that provided rich data and who had prolonged conversation with the same partners for at least 2 semesters. 2 of the participants continued to use and have been using this application for 1.5 years. The collected data coming from 4 Italian intermediate courses, and it is based on the observation artifacts and semi-structured interviews that were recorded. Artifacts represent the primary data for the current study. I reviewed more than 400 pages of the students' weekly reports and final portfolios. Due to the restrictions of the space, this paper has an emphasis on the lived experience with Italian and with the use of the application of the participants rather than an in-depth analysis of their histories. There are 3 types of projected self emerging from the data. This example describes a hypothetical imagined projected self. This is an example of discursive processes of how Clara is locating the self in the storyline. In this excerpt, Clara imagines how her weekend would be if she were to visit her friend. The first thing that we can notice is how detailed this description is. All of the information here in this excerpt are coming from the previous multimodal conversations that she had with her friend. Clara talks to his friends regularly. When the last time I conducted the interview with her, she was still talking to her partner. Clara demonstrates that she is hypothetically able to function in the Italian space just as a local. She is someone who not only knows how to get around because she has been imagining a weekend in Italy, but she is also able to use her resources and act in a virtual imagined space, as it is her space, a normal and familiar space. We can see this confident positioning in the detailed description and options that she provides in the itinerary. If I were to go to Italy is a hypothetical sentence. Hypothetical is used when we think about something we would do and how we would carry it out. It is an imagined action that carries also the agents who would do the action. While all of the verbs are in the conditional tense, they project a very confident factual position of what would exactly happen. Carla relies on the narrative of her friend. We can see this by the information she placed in the parentheses, in which she emphasizes the credibility that her imagined weekend could also count as a real one. In a way, she is voicing her correspondent who has told her all of the information, and she places herself into the narrative that is also a product of co-construction, as every detail is coming from the multimodal conversation between her and her friend. She says about the train, if it were to work again, because she knows from the image that her friend sent her that the train is currently not operating, since a truck got stuck in the middle. She also learned that her friend's grandma loves cooking for people. These are just two examples of how her imagination is based on the narrative and the multimodal communication between her and her friend. As she enters into her friend's space, she repositions herself as part of a community. She positions herself as a confident person who is in charge of the itinerary. This is indicated by the verb tenses she uses that do not have any hedging, they are assertive. She could have edging words to we would start or his grandma would make, something like maybe we could go or would go, or it is possible that his grandma would cook. But all of the insecurities are missing from this excerpt. Everything is affirmative and doubtless. This supports the confident repositioning that she takes on. She is very confident in knowing what exactly would happen during her visit, and this is marked by her agentive way of using the pronoun I and the pronoun we, as she positions herself as an insider who has in her position greater cultural awareness. All the details and information that makes the target language community not foreign at all. In this passage, we have seen an example of how Carla is projecting herself as a participant not only in the space of the target language community, but also in the everyday life of her language exchange partner. Now we are going to move on the second type of imagination. Because of the time constraint, I will focus only on the second example. The second example shows a projected instance self, a co-constructed imagination between two participants that is spontaneous. It is based on multimodal conversations between participants and one that happens instantaneously in the discourse. When Tommaso sends an image of the concert to his friend, she immediately responds saying, "I'm coming." As a reply, Tommaso enters into the imagined make-believe scene and answers, "I will save you a seat," showing her friend that her virtual presence is welcomed and expected. This is followed by an emoji of a blinking face by his friend, acknowledging the participation in the make-believe game in which they both imagined a possible physical presence that was instead carried out by a virtual one in the space they created synchronously. As a follow-up, Tommaso also sent a video of the concert thinking of his friend and providing it this way a virtual space that included multiple channels and multiple semiotic elements of sounds, images, moving actions synchronously. This example of the direct discourse demonstrates an instant imagined presence that was co-constructed between the two participants, using the affordances of multimodal communication that the application provided. This type of imagination shows how participants comfortably move between spaces, and as they do, they deconstruct the time and space barriers that no longer seem to pose obstacles. This imagination is meaningful for both and provides new positioning and opportunities to learners as agents who are able to show and share their everyday life with their partners as they sustain their engagement and development of greater cultural awareness and increased motivation. For the first question, what did learners learn with the use of HelloTalk, and what effects did multimodal communication have on the development of different types of imaginations? The answers are the following. I will let you read these. For the second question, what types of imagination can we distinguish? The answers are the following. I would like to thank you for everyone and thank you for listening to this presentation. I'm looking forward to receive your feedback and comments on my work, and I would like to express my deepest appreciation to all those who provided me the possibility to complete this research. Thank you so much for listening.